But I'm extremely fortunate this evening to be able to introduce to you the world-renowned author Orhan Pamuk, who will come to the stage in a moment to say a few words. He'll be joined by Christopher Lydon, host of Open Source, who will interview Orhan and then help facilitate the question and answer period. Orhan was born in possibly my favorite city in the world, Istanbul, and he's one of the most celebrated authors of our time. He writes of universal themes and bases all of his novels in his native Turkey. His book, My Name is Red, published in 1998, won, among other awards, the Italian Grinzane Cavour and the International Impact Dublin Literary Award. Snow, which Orhan describes as his first and last political novel, was selected as one of the best 100 books of 2004 by the New York Times, and that received Le Prix Medici Étranger, the award for the best foreign novel in France. In 2008, Time magazine chose him as one of the 100 most influential people in the world, and he also won the Nobel Prize for Literature, becoming the second youngest person to receive the award in its history. Orhan's latest book, The Museum of Innocence, was released in August 2008. He very happily notes in his biography that he's been writing novels for 30 years, and he's never done any other job except writing. We're very thrilled to have such a prolific and exceptional writer at this first Boston Book Festival. Hoş geldiniz Orhan Bey, çok teşekkürler. Please join me in welcoming Orhan Pamuk.
I'm very pleased to be here, such a great crowd. Thank you very much for coming. You'll enjoy this. A new book of mine is published in English, Museum of Innocence. I'm going to read about it, read from it, talk about it a bit. Then I'm going to sit down and take your questions and take other questions and talk a bit. The novel took me almost 6 years to write, in some hectic times, but it was always a joy to go back to it. It's in hard times, in good times, it made me going. It's a story about love, what love is, how its effect on us, but it doesn't put love on a pedestal, but tries to, in a more cool, detached manner, understand what love is, what happens to us when we fall in love, and go to the subject. I gave extra energy not to sugarize love, not to put it on a pedestal, but see it as a humane thing that happens to all of us. But what happens to us when we fall in love is one of the major concerns of this book. But it's not a philosophical, of course, discourse, but it's a story. So maybe I'll just give a first spoonful of the novel, just reading 1.5 pages. So to give you a sense of what it is, then I will talk, then I will read, then I will talk. In order to understand what I'm going to read to you now, you have to, in your mind's eye, imagine that we are in Istanbul. The story takes place between 1975 and 1984 in Istanbul. But then events, or the love story, stormy story, had passed away. The narrator is telling us about these events almost after 30 years after. 30 years had passed, the wised-up narrator is telling this story. He is also, in order to enjoy this more, let us imagine that he collected some relics, some objects, some things that associate to his, that make him remember his beloved. So more or less we are in a museum, and the narrator, the storyteller, is telling the story through showing us objects like a museum guide. This is this, and the relation to the story is that kind of sort of a discourse of a museum guide, tongue-in-cheek, of course. An anatomical chart of love pains. So this is a sort of a brief answer to what happens to us, to more male men. This depiction of the internal organs of the human body is taken from an advertisement for Paradison, a painkiller on display in the window of every pharmacy in Istanbul at the time, meaning 1975, and I use it here to illustrate to the museum visitor where the agony of love first appeared, where it became most pronounced, and how far it spread. Let me explain to readers without access to our museum that the deepest pain was initially felt in the upper left-hand quadrant of my stomach. As the pain increased, it would, as the overlay indicates, radiate to the cavity between my lungs and my stomach. At that point, its abdominal presence would no longer be confined to the left side, having spread to the right, feeling rather as if a hot poker or screwdriver were twisting into me. It was as if first my stomach and then my entire abdomen were filling up with acid, as if sticky, red-hot little starfish were attaching themselves to my organs. As the pain grew more pervasive and intense, I would feel it climb into my forehead, over the back of my neck, my shoulders, my entire body, even invading my dreams to take a smothering hold of me. Sometimes, as diagrammed, a star of pain would form centered on my navel, shooting shafts of acid to my throat and my mouth, and I feared it would throttle me. If I hit the wall with my hand or did a few calisthenics or otherwise pushed myself on an athlete, as an athlete does, I could briefly block the pain. But at its most muted, I could still feel it like an intravenous drip entering my bloodstream. And it was always there in my stomach, that was its epicenter. There was an earthquake in Istanbul, so I'm using earthquake concepts. Despite all its tangible manifestations, I knew that the pain emanated from my mind, from my soul, but even so, I could not bring myself to cleanse my mind and deliver myself from it. Inexperienced in such feeling, I was like a proud young officer ambushed in his first command, forced into a mental rout. And it only made matters worse that I had hope with every new day, new dreams, new reasons that Füsun, his beloved, might appear at the Merhamet apartments, the place where they made love, in which, by making the agony bearable, prolonged it. This is just a little spoonful of the the novel is 560 pages. I read it from, I think from 150s, one-third of the thing. Our hero is in love. It's in a way unrequited love. Beautiful things had happened, as in all love stories or melodramas, whatever you call it. Now he cannot get hold of his beloved, and he is in pain. And then, after some pages, he finds a little solution. Let me read that to you too. Swimming on my back. Some time had passed. Now we are at page almost 200, I'm sorry. So 1/10 of the novel had passed, and since he suffered a lot, he finds some solutions to his pain. Swimming on my back. To be sure, those painful September days had their dark beauty, and as the month wore on, I discovered an important new way of making them bearable. If I swam on my back, the pain would ease. To make this happen, I had to throw my head very far back to the point where I could see all the way to the bottom of the Bosphorus, but upside down, and I had to carry on swimming in this attitude for some time without coming up for air. As I backstroked through the current and the waves, I would open my eyes to see the inverted Bosphorus changing colors, fading into a blackness that awakened me to a vastness altogether different from the boundless pain of love, offering me a glimpse of a world without end. Because the Bosphorus is so deep, so close to the shore, there were times when I could see the bottom and at times I couldn't, but to glimpse this brilliantly colored realm, albeit upside down, was to see a great, mysterious whole, at whose sight one could not but rejoice to be alive, humbled at the thought of being part of something greater. Gazing down at the rusty cans, the bottle caps, the gaping mussels, and even the ghosts of ancient ships, I would contemplate the vastness of history and time and my own insignificance. At times like these, I would notice that I could enjoy concentrating on my love and being absorbed by it. Exposed and grieving ever more deeply, I could cleanse my soul. What mattered was not my pain, but my connection with this mysterious infinity shimmering beneath me. As the waters of the Bosphorus poured into my mouth, my throat, my ears, my nostrils, I could tell that the jinns inside me, governing equilibrium and happiness, were well pleased. A sort of sea drunkenness would overtake me as I propelled myself backward, stroke after stroke, until there was no pain in my stomach at all. I would feel a deep compassion for Fisun, his beloved, welling up inside me at that same moment, and this reminded me of how much anger I felt too. This book is also a sort of a survey of what we do when we fall in love. We get angry, we forgive, we have hopes, we lose them, so forth and so on. I'm continuing. Seeing me racing backward towards a Soviet oil tanker or a city line ferry, anxiously tooting its horn, Sibel. Unfortunately, he is engaged to someone else. Sibel would jump up and down on the shore, frantically calling to me, but most of the time I would not hear her cries. In this habit of swimming so dangerously close to the steady procession of city line ferries, international oil tankers, cargo ships, and laden down with coal, passenger boats, and barges distributing beer and meltem to the Bosphorus restaurants, almost as a challenge to those vessels, great and small, Sibel saw an unhealthy impulse, and in her heart she wanted me to stop bobbing backward in the Bosphorus in front of the house. But knowing what good it did, chasing away the pain, she didn't insist. His fiancée knows that he is badly in love with someone else. Perhaps she wants to cure him of love. I'm sorry. So, every love story